disappearances that feel like puzzles, and then there are disappearances that feel like voids. The kind that don't just leave questions behind, but leave something missing in the world itself. A silence, a gap, a presence that used to exist and suddenly doesn't anymore. When someone goes missing, the mind does something strange. It refuses to accept the unknown, so it fills in the blanks. They probably left. They'll come back. They just need time. Hope becomes the default, because the alternative is too heavy to carry. But hope can be misleading, because sometimes the truth isn't far away. It isn't hidden in another city. It isn't waiting to be discovered years later in some distant place. Sometimes the truth never left. This is the story of Daniel O'Keefe and the terrifying reality of how someone can disappear without ever really going anywhere at all. July 2011, Geelong, Australia. A quiet place. The kind of place where routines feel permanent, where people know each other, where nothing ever seems too far out of place. Inside one of those homes, Daniel O'Keefe was living what, from the outside, looked like a normal life. 24 years old, young, still figuring things out, like most people at that age. But normal doesn't always mean stable, and quiet doesn't always mean peaceful, because beneath the surface, Daniel had been struggling. Not in a way that demanded attention, not in a way that made headlines, but in the quiet, internal way that so many people carry without anyone fully seeing it. Depression doesn't always look like collapse. Sometimes it looks like distance, like silence, like someone slowly pulling away without ever explaining why. And then one day, without warning, he left. No announcement, no dramatic moment, no sign that this would be the last time anyone would see him. He walked out of his family home and disappeared. At first, it didn't feel like an emergency. People leave all the time, to think, to breathe, to escape. But hours passed, then more hours, then night fell, and something started to feel wrong. Because Daniel didn't take anything with him. No wallet, no essentials, no indication that he was planning to go anywhere far. And yet, he didn't come back. The shift from concern to fear is subtle. It doesn't happen all at once. It creeps in, quietly. At first, he's probably fine. Then, this is unusual. Then, something's not right. And then, you reach the point where you can't ignore it anymore. Daniel's family reported him missing, and just like that, his disappearance became real. Search efforts began quickly. Police were involved, friends were contacted, every recent interaction was examined. Where had he been? Who had he spoken to? What state of mind was he in? And that's when the context began to matter. Because Daniel hadn't just left, he had left while struggling, and that changes everything. Because now the search isn't just about location, it's about mindset. Where would someone go if they didn't want to be found? The early days of a missing person case are the most intense. Everything moves quickly. Every lead feels important. Every hour matters. Search teams moved through nearby areas, bushland, trails, roads. Volunteers joined in. People who didn't know Daniel, but understood what it meant for someone to disappear. Posters went up. His face spread across the region. His name became something people recognized. And then, the sightings began. Someone thought they saw him in another town. Someone reported a man who looked like him at a train station. Someone was certain they had passed him on the street. Each sighting brought hope, a surge of possibility. He's alive. He's out there. We're getting closer. But sightings are complicated because they don't always lead anywhere, and over time, they start to blur together. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into years, and something changes when a case lasts that long. The urgency fades. Not because people stop caring, but because the intensity isn't sustainable. Searches become less frequent. Leads become less reliable. But the family never stops searching. Because for them, time doesn't move the same way. Every day is still a question. Every night is still unresolved. And hope becomes something quieter, more fragile. Not gone, just different. Throughout all of this, there was one place that never became the focus. The house. The place he was last seen. Because the assumption was simple. He left. And once that assumption is made, everything moves outward. Search the roads, search the towns, search the distance. Not the place he came from. The house sat there for years, unchanged, unquestioned, built partially into a limestone hill, solid, closed, seemingly ordinary, but appearances can be deceptive. By 2016, 5 years had passed. 5 years of searching, 5 years of wondering, 5 years of not knowing. Life had moved forward in some ways, but not completely, because cases like this never really end. They just linger. Until something breaks the silence. It didn't come from a breakthrough, or a tip, or a new piece of evidence. It came from something ordinary, renovation. Daniel's father had begun working on the house, making changes, fixing parts of the structure, and during that process, something was uncovered, a space beneath the house, not a room, not a basement, a cavity, narrow, hidden, pressed between the structure of the home and the rock behind it, a space most people wouldn't notice, and even if they did, wouldn't think to enter. But inside that space, there was something, and in that moment, everything changed. Because what was found was Daniel. For 5 years, he had been there. Not miles away, not in another city, not lost, somewhere distant, right there, beneath the house, meters away from where his family lived. The realization is difficult to process, even from the outside, because it challenges something fundamental, the idea that distance equals absence. In this case, it didn't. The immediate question was how? How could someone be that close and not be found? The answer lies in the space itself. It was concealed, tight, difficult to access, not somewhere you would casually look, not somewhere search teams would immediately think to check. And because the assumption was that he had left, no one focused inward. There was no evidence of foul play, no signs of a struggle, no indication anyone else was involved, which leaves one possibility, that Daniel entered that space himself. Why? That's the part no one can fully answer. Maybe he was overwhelmed. Maybe he needed isolation. Maybe he didn't intend for things to end the way they did. Or maybe he did. And that uncertainty is what makes this case so haunting. The official conclusion? No suspicious circumstances. But that doesn't bring closure, because closure requires understanding, and this case doesn't fully offer that. Instead, it leaves something else behind, a quiet, unsettling truth that sometimes the place you'd never think to look is exactly where the answer is. There's something deeply unsettling about proximity, about the idea that someone can be so close and still completely lost. Because it forces a question. How often do we look outward when the answer is right beside us, and how many stories end in places no one ever thought to check? In the end, Daniel O'Keefe's story isn't just about disappearance. It's about assumption and the terrifying reality that sometimes being missing doesn't mean being far away. Sometimes it just means being unseen.